Hello, Chosen Chimp here. Thanks to Brian, aka Fnord Prefect, for requesting over on Patreon, distinguished follower £1 a month, that I make a video all about more than 30 years in the TARDIS. And to celebrate this wonderful occasion, I will be delivering to you, the viewer, a traditional VHS cassette experience. Come on! Oh, are you serious? I'm not having this. No, I can't do that. I've lost the remote. Just wait till YouTube comes along, mate. Boo!
Your time and indulgence, please, good followers, as I state the case that 30 Years in the TARDIS is indeed the greatest documentary on classic Doctor Who ever made. Of course, one might consider the 1977 Lively Arts episode, Who's Doctor Who, to be a contender to that title, and power to you, because that is also a great documentary, with a ton of behind-the-scenes footage, more one-on-one with Tom Baker than viewers from the 80s onward could ever hope to see, and some fascinating insights into the creative processes of Doctor Who and its psychological impact on viewers young and old. At the time of making this video, Who's Doctor Who can be found on BBC iPlayer. If you haven't already watched it, you should. This, on the other hand, no dice. To see this, you have to get hold of a copy of the Legacy Collection on DVD, which contains Shada and more than 30 years. But maybe somehow you have preserved a recording of this 50-minute documentary, first titled 30 Years in the TARDIS, from when it was originally transmitted on BBC One back in the 29th of November 1993, 3 decades and 6 days after the original transmission of An Unearthly Child. Or even better, you have what I got, which is the 1994 VHS release, where the documentary was re-edited in parts and extended to a whopping 87 minutes, and then retitled to More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS. Apt because at this point it had actually been more than 30 years, and also because there was more in the video release than there was in the TV edit. Hope that clears that up. This is just about the most fun classic Doctor Who documentary ever, and I think that's the biggest difference between this immersive spectacle and the more serious analytical stylings of Who's Doctor Who. Yes, it serves as a user guide for somebody from the outside looking in, but more crucially, it's just a big old riot for Doctor Who dieharders. Geek Out City from start to finish, containing a wealth of interviews from cast, crew and celebrity fans, covering the show's near 3-decade run, with some wonderful inside testimonies from Colin Baker, Sylvester McCoy, Sophie Aldred, John Pertwee, Elizabeth Sladen, Carol Ann Ford, Fraser Hines, Deborah Waiting, Verity Lambert, Philip Hinchcliffe, Terence Dix, Eric Soward, and more. And all of it narrated by your main man, Nicholas Courtney. Interviews and narration are interspersed with some of the most go-hard clips from the TV show, and there's a wealth of Doctor Who related material from other shows, such as John Pertwee hijacking what was meant to be a perfectly straightforward Doctor Who competition on Good Morning with Anne and Nick. There's also a gaggle of monsters turning up at Pebble Mill at 1, terrifying, and a war machine ruthlessly infiltrating the Blue Peter studio. Okay, I might have hyperbolized that one a little bit. And all of this together weaves a narrative which provides a slimline history of Doctor Who from its beginning in November 23rd, 1963, all the way up to its final episode in 1989, ending with the great unknown of Doctor Who's future in television.
We understand that you're in negotiations with Steven Spielberg for the future of Doctor Who.
You may well think that, but I couldn't possibly comment.
It's okay, we know. Other highlights include William Hartnell's legendary passion for the Doctor Who product, the Peter Cushing movies, featuring some words from Roberta Tovey, so you get 2 Susans for the price of 1. Worthy of note in the extended VHS edition is a segment featuring Terry Nation, all about how the Daleks represented Nazis and how Raymond Cusick is also sort of the creator of Daleks, something that Jon Pertwee was eager to highlight in the Good Morning with Ann and Nick appearance. Controversies and politics? Yep, there's a bit of that too, with some commentary regarding the apparent sexism and viewer identification in Doctor Who, not to mention the arguably questionable sex appeal of many of the companions, as well as the whole violence controversy, as famously moaned about by Mary Whitehouse, who took offence to Tom Baker's face in a puddle, responded to with zero understanding of what a Time Lord simulation is. You see, he's right there, he's fine. Shut up. 30 Years has a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff too. Raw footage, chroma key special effect test shots, and some amusing stories of how Daleks and the like were a pain in the backside to work with. There's even a chilling testimony from Sophie Aldred about a malfunction during the filming of Battlefield, whereby Sylvester McCoy's quick response reportedly saved her life. And of course, what self-respecting Doctor Who documentary wouldn't also be full to the brim of obscure trivia, or more accurately, essential information, and essential is no exaggeration.
Gold to a Cyberman is like garlic to a vampire, and to get his raw is a flushing lavatory. Slow down, of course.
What?
More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS is broken up into 3 main sections: Doctor Who and the Daleks, Monsters and Companions, and Laughter and Tears behind the scenes. And what's really funny is how these sections, particularly in the VHS extended version, are broken up by false commercials which were actually real, and in the context of this documentary, a showcase unto itself of Doctor Who in the TV advertising world. Canon? Well, I'll let you be the judge of that.
Ask it how to handle a woman.
Romana, was you right?
Yes.
Oh, Prime.
Clever Prime.
You can say that again.
Clever Prime.
What?
It's these little trinkets and other attention to detail which puts this documentary across as a genuine passion project. And when I dug out the old sticky tape and rust home video system and fired it up for the first time in, well, nearly 30 years to be fair, it didn't take long for me to remember that I watched this tape again and again and again during my years as a youngling. And also being very pleased that even after all this time, the tape was still in really good condition. And I have good word from a reliable source, more on that in due course, that I'm not the only one of my generation enamoured with this piece of media. But possibly the most enjoyable and intriguing component to More Than 30 Years in the TARDIS are the numerous, and I'm going to say partially canonical, mini-sodes woven into the documentary. They're a kind of throwback to scenes from the old classics reimagined. You got Jon Pertwee being harassed by this dinosaur again, as in Invasion of the Dinosaurs, Susan being chased by Daleks on Westminster Bridge, being of course a nod to the Dalek invasion of Earth, other Susan hiding from the Daleks, Collins, Doc and Perry being stalked by Cybermen reenacting their iconic walk down the steps of St Paul's Cathedral in London, their neomorphs, not early cyber faction. You should have all read this cover to cover, I jest. And there's the 7th Doctor and Ace running into various creatures from their tenure, Fifi from the Happiness Patrol and the likes, and even Jamie and Victoria being apprehended by... wow, that's an impressive quantity of Daleks. And let's not forget the Brigadier on the run from the Autons, only to fall right into their trap. Heh, unit. I will state categorically that all of these sequences together make for something a lot more enjoyable and faithful to the brand than something like, say, Dimensions in Time. Sorry, but it's true. And what's even more interesting is the frequent appearance of this young character, the boy. He too has a run-in with the Autons, but then sees a Dalek where a letterbox should be, but then you realise he's just on the sofa at home all scared, bless him, and eventually he gets comforted by Sarah Jane / Elizabeth Sladen, who teleports into his room and turns out to be a shape-shifting Sontaran with glowing green eyes. Cool. And the funny thing is, it's heavily implied that they're actually the actors in jeopardy rather than the people that they play in Doctor Who. You've got William Hartnell's granddaughter hiding from a Dalek, for goodness sake. And the fact of there being a bit of a blur across the manifolds of fiction was only orchestrated in the name of giving the audience a bit of extra fun, and therefore should not be looked into too deep. This is clearly a meta-commentary delineating the bond between audience, actor and fictional media itself, and how all are tethered and inseparable across the frayed realms of reality, striving to define ourselves as a clause within a tome. We are the auteurs, the actors are puppets, Doctor Who the all-encompassing... Okay, sorry. Kind of got caught up in the moment there. A Cybermat does that, which is good enough for me.
Use the ray gun, child, it's your only hope.
You know, I could continue to heartily waffle on about the numerous trinkets in this documentary because I haven't mentioned anything, not by a long shot. You really just gotta go and watch it yourself. And I know I should spend some time explaining how this documentary came about and the person behind it. It was produced by Kevin Davies, a devout Doctor Who fan whose other credentials include Shakedown, the 1994 Terence Dicks written real-time productions drama themed around Sontarans and directed by Kevin Davies, and also Dalek Mania, an independent production created in a similar style to 30 Years, but this time all about the two Peter Cushing movies. And yeah, it would be nigh on impossible to try and view the whole 30 Years in the TARDIS project through the mind of Kevin Davies, a Whovian of high standards and an auteur in his own right. My guess would be looking through the various web entries on this guy, including this detailed write-up by Paul Scoons on a New Zealand website. I would guess that during the pre-production process, Kevin Davies probably went into this with the intention of... making a Doctor Who thing. Tell you what, I'll just ask him.
I was completing my first professional commission as a writer-director, which was the making of The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, a documentary for BBC Video over at BBC Worldwide. And when they said, oh, I don't know, I think it was David M. Jackson, my producer, said, we're gearing up for the 30th anniversary of Doctor Who. Have you got any ideas? And I was with Mark Ayres, and we both got quite excited and thought, yeah, well, we can probably come up with something. But anyway, I went away. I wrote some proposals, some different sort of ideas of how we might do things. After I had a meeting with John Whiston, who was the head of the Late Show Productions. Late Show Productions was like an autonomous unit within music and arts at the BBC. They were all ex-Alan Yentob sort of trainees and associates, and they made things very much his way. And yeah, they were doing theme nights and all that kind of thing, and they wanted... they were originally thinking of doing a theme night. Plus they said, oh, we want some 5-minuters and, you know, just come up with some stuff. So I did, and I hit them with so many different proposals over the first part of that year, and it was slowly gearing up, but it took quite a while for it to get firmed up. So I was quite excited, and it was all because of the making of Hitchhiker, because John Whiston liked the way I did that. Adrian Ruggersford had been commissioned to write The Dark Dimension, and he was working within BBC Worldwide, and I think that's where we first met. And because my day job at that time, I'd been doing several years in commercials. After I'd been a special effects animator on Who Framed Roger Rabbit, I specialised in commercials that mixed live action with animation. And in those days, animation meant hand-drawn animation. And so, you know, I was working on very high-end blue-chip commercials and doing that kind of thing. And so I was hoping to bring that to Doctor Who, which is how I got embroiled in Dark Dimension. There was that brief moment where I was halfway between, you know, will I be post-production effects supervisor on The Dark Dimension, the biggest Doctor Who drama as it would have been at that time, or do I want to go and be, you know, a bigger fish in a smaller pool by doing a documentary about Doctor Who? And I realised I couldn't do both. And for one horrible, what they got like later got termed Freaky Friday, I was on the horns of the dilemma. Do I do, you know, do I be a small fish in a big pond with Dark Dimension, or do I do my documentary, and for 2 hours I agonised until I got a phone call to say Dark Dimension had been cancelled, and it was probably a relief because I think we were running out of time by then, and it would have been highly pressured. So I happily went on to do what became 30 Years in the TARDIS. When I finally got my foot under the desk at BBC in the East Tower at the Late Show Productions, they gave me a production office, a production assistant, very experienced because I was a new boy, and a researcher, and I had to rewrite the format of what I was going to do there and then on that day, and the only thing I could really base it on was I had an off-air recording, which I've still got, of the Late Show Productions documentary about Batman, which was a tie-in to the 1989 Tim Burton film, and I thought that was a great model. A little boy goes into an attic and looks at all the Batman memorabilia and things, and various experts come and go from the programme talking about the effects of the comic books, and they talk to as many of the comic book creators as they could find. And so I thought, well, that's kind of what they want, something like that. So that's what I went with. And the little boy was representative of the audience in both the case of the Batman and 30 Years in the TARDIS. And so I had the little boy character who would go through a series of sort of adventures, meeting up with the doctors and companions, and maybe a bit of play acting with some of the monsters and things like that. And I wanted to create some new sort of cliffhangers in the style of the old show, and to show how it could look nowadays, as it was then, you know, to use the burgeoning digital technology to do some effects and say, hey, Doctor Who could look really great. And so that's what I was thinking of, really, you know. So the little boy running along and seeing the post box and it turns into a Dalek, I mean, that's kind of like me running home from school, really, and that was it. So it was quite fun, because when my mum watched the programme, she said, did you cast that little boy because he looked like you back then? And honestly, I hadn't realised. I just chose the kid who was the best when I went to the Sylvia Young stage school to find a little kid that could play the main character in this wraparound drama within the documentary, and he was the best. And the fact that he happened to look a little bit like me with the same haircut and everything, me in the 60s, was purely incidental, I promise. I'd met a lot of the cast members, various doctors and companions and things like that. I'd met a lot of them at conventions, and I'd been a bit behind the scenes on many of the conventions, especially the very early ones. And so I was getting a bit blasé at that point about meeting the actors and working with them. I still had a lot to learn, but, you know, you just basically treat them like real people, which is what they are. And not too much deference, although I did say to someone who'd worked with Jon Pertwee, I'd met him many times, but I hadn't really formally been introduced. I said, what's the secret with him? And someone advised me that so long as he thinks you think he's the governor, he'll be fine. And so I made sure that he knew that from moment one. And indeed, you know, the 70s doctors, they were my era, so I had a certain amount of deference, I suppose. But Pertwee's an old rascal, and I loved him for that. And yeah, we had a good day with the Whomobile. In fact, he was quite moved, I think, when he got out the taxi and saw it for the first time. I'd already, in Making of Hitchhiker, I'd done a wraparound drama linking all the bits together of the documentary, kind of like they're the bread of the sandwich, but the real meat is inside, is the documentary part. So I just did the same again. It's what John Wiston wanted from me, really. So I just called up and got as many costumes and existing bits and bobs. You know, we found the Whomobile, which was great, put that together with Pertwee. Setting up the shoots was a bit of a palaver, because I knew from experience, I'd done it as a teenager. I'd taken a Dalek onto Westminster Bridge on a Sunday morning in the height of summer. It's the only time that it was ever likely to be quiet. So a lot of the shoots, I wanted deserted London. I always loved the stories that had a bit of that in it, like Invasion of the Dinosaurs or Dalek Invasion of Earth. I loved that sort of scenario. So that's it. I set it up for various Sundays in a row. and just tying everyone down, finding all the various bits of costume, the many Daleks, and screwing down as many of the schedules of the actors to try and fit it into our scenario. The only one we didn't get was Peter Davison, who was sadly, he was away filming Black Beauty, I think it was, or something, in France, and so it was really difficult to tie up with him. And of course, in those days, Tom Baker didn't want to come and play, which is a great shame. And he's warmed up to the programme since. I think when I look back on 30 years, I'm proud of the fact that it was as good as it was. We had really good resources. I was very well looked after by the Late Show Productions. They'd never dealt with, in fact, my PA had been at the BBC forever. I mean, she was there before TV Centre was up and functioning. I used to laugh and say that she was installed like the foundation stones and the place was built around her. But she'd never dealt with costume, makeup and special effects, because they were essentially music and arts for a documentary making facility, and I was trying to do little bits of drama in between. So I think that threw them a bit of a wild card. But I'm proud of the things like, well, obviously the TARDIS shot I wanted to do, going through the TARDIS doors from the police box on location straight into the studio set, and I knew it could be done with motion control and digital compositing as it was then. And I had help with really good friends, people that I knew. The cameraman that did the motion control was Pete Tyler, who worked on Red Dwarf and things like that, and was friends with Mike Tucker. And my friend Tim Burgess, who did the digital work afterwards, all the post-production, of piecing together the special effects shots. And I knew it was possible because I'd done it on commercials, but here we were applying it to my favourite long-running science fiction show. So I'm proud of the longevity. I'm proud of the fact that people generally, a generation younger than me, come up to me at conventions and things and ask me to sign the covers, and they tell me how they wore out the VHS and doing things like this, taking part in podcasts and YouTube things. I'm very proud of it, and I look back on it with great fondness, even though there was a bit of heartache in the middle of it all, with the edit going slightly wrong and the producer stepping in, but you live and learn. I was quite young. And what do I think of Doctor Who nowadays? I follow it. I follow Doctor Who even now in the new series. Not quite religiously, but I follow it avidly. And as a fan, I mean, I think like a football fan, you support your programme even when it's, you support your team even when they're not playing so well or whatever. I mean, I don't always agree with every decision made on the programme. Why would I ever? But, whatever a Doctor Who is at the moment, in 3 years' time, it will be something else. So I love all the recent Doctors, very much, just follow them all, and I support the programme. And I probably always will. I was born 2 years before the show started, and even at my christening there's a police box, a real one, in the background of the photographs. So I think, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool fan. Sylvester McCoy was a bit grumpy when he turned up, because the taxi that brought him over to the Slough Quasar, where we did his bit, had dumped him at the wrong shopping centre. So he had to walk around and find where the Quasar was at a different shopping centre slightly down the road. So anyway, Sophie helped calm him, and he was such fun that day. I mean, he's a natural clown, and the improv with Fifi and things was great fun. A lot of that was made up on the spot. The other thing that I remember is I didn't realise until much later that Mark Gatiss, who I didn't know at the time, was inside one of the Daleks on Westminster Bridge. And I went along to watch him filming his one when he did Adventures in Space and Time. And he came over to say hello. I didn't recognise him, all swathed in scarves and wool. It was a freezing day. But yeah, so that was kind of fun. I put a call out to get as many Doctor Who fans with equity cards to come and be in the monsters and various scenarios. What am I doing these days? Well, I mean, the most recent thing, the 42 book, you can see in the corner there, came out last year and was a Sunday Times #1 bestseller in the non-fiction category. It's all about the archive of Douglas Adams, and my current project is a book designed for September of 2025, which is the Hitchhiker's television scripts. And it's called I Never Could Get the Hang of Thursdays, which is a line from the programme which the publishers chose. I'm working for Unbound.com, where the book is, the projects are crowdfunded, and I'm also kicking around a memoir about the making of 30 Years in the TARDIS, but more on that anon. Oh yeah, and in the forthcoming TV scripts of Hitchhiker book, there will be a little recap on Douglas's career up to that point, during which I hope to reveal a little bit of Doctor Who history from Douglas that not everyone would be aware of. Mysterious. I've always been a fan of Doctor Who, and I support it in whatever format it's in at the moment. I think I can measure my life pretty much. Well, the first 40 years of my life I can measure alongside the history of Doctor Who. I'm a bit more vague about the pattern of the last 20 years. I'm not quite so informed, shall we say. People often ask, do I want to do a 60 years of Doctor Who or any other? And it's like, no, it's somebody else's turn now. I mean, somebody who is as passionate and loves the most recent run of Doctor Who as much as I love the classic era should really make the programmes that sum up the whole shebang. And I think the Blu-ray guys are doing a great job. Chris Chapman and all the gang make great documentaries for the Blu-rays. So yeah, I've always looked back on it. I think it was mind expanding. I think we have Terence Dicks and all the other people that wrote Target books to help expand it more fully, and I think it was, what did they used to say? It was designed for the intelligent 14-year-old, and when I was 14 I thought that meant me. So I was quite happy with that Robert Holmes, Philip Hinchcliffe era of the programme, and Barry and Terence before that. Meant a lot to me at the time, and it still does.
Ultra huge thanks to Kevin Davies for all of his help putting this video together, and for making more than 30 years in the TARDIS in the first place. What a thoroughly wonderful chap. As I said at the beginning of this video, this was made possible via my supporters over on Patreon. If you want to head over to patreon.com/chosenchimp and become a distinguished follower for £1 a month, it means that you can hit me up in the DMs and request a Doctor Who subject all of your very own for me to talk about. Classic Doctor Who stories are preferred, but really just anything Doctor Who related, suggest it to me, I will think it through and I will produce the video. Your name will be mentioned in the video, and your support will contribute to making this channel a bigger, stronger, smarter place. All the best to everybody watching. Have a good one.